Hello, hello, hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Are you wearing the Marthas on your head right now?
yeah.
Callie, she's wearing the Marthas on her head right now. She looks so cute in them. Come look. Callie, come look. Sorry, it's the president of my company. She's going to love that. She needs this. Those are so cute on
I
you.
love them so
Dude,
much.
I can't wear them.
Why?
Because they look like this. Come look at how cute she looks. Come around and look. Come on, come on. This is Tally. She's the president of my company. She hates being on camera, so this is fun. Look how cute those look.
Hi.
I know, they're adorable.
Yeah, they are.
I can't
They're
wear
so
them.
awesome.
I love them. They're too big for you?
Yeah, because my face is like a miniature 4-year-old's head. It, my 5-year-old's head is legitimately, arguably bigger than mine. So if it makes you feel any better,
5-year-olds have big heads.
well, yeah, he's a beef. We call him beefcakes. So
I like
hi, nice
that.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. Everyone has been really excited about having you on the show. We have told everybody well in advance that Mikhaila Peterson was coming on. And of course, I got the standard amount of questions you would think that I would get when they know anything about you. But I have my own list of questions and my own curiosities about what this meat-eating woman who looks the opposite of a meat-eating woman should look like. I have so many things I want to know about you. But first, I want to start off really with, what is this? You have a book coming out.
I do. It's called Could Be Worse. Uh, and I think it'll be out around March. There's a paper shortage in America because of COVID. There's an everything shortage. So it's been a bit delayed. But it's about my experience with an autoimmune disorder and putting that into remission with diet and with this crazy all meat diet. And then the last couple of years of like my family kind of being more thrown into the spotlight, my dad. So hopefully, I'm hoping it'll kind of show people how I figured out how to heal,
Right.
so that they can kind of understand where it's coming from. Because just coming at them with like all meat diet fixed my autoimmune disorder is quite a lot. I need like a book's worth of information to explain what brought me to that point.
Yeah, well, not only that is it's an intimidating diet to
Yeah.
not only speak about, but to actually implement into your daily life.
Yes.
So for you, I kind of started to follow you obviously through your dad. I think I want to arguably say that most people, your dad really was the one that started off that kind of viral sensation that is your
Yes.
family. So I think that's fair to say.
Definitely.
But I've always been a follower of your dad's literature in as soon as he put his book out. But before that, I started watching some of his, I guess his seminars, his classes, his whatever. I heard about him, and what it struck me the most was his accountability. And I thought to myself, well, there's kids here. He has kids, and I started looking you up, and I'm like, oh, he has smart kids, and I'm like, oh, I need to talk to this woman because there is this perception within having famous parents or parents of some other type of, even professors have this air about them, or doctors and surgeons have this air about them. So, being a child of that, what was that like for you to have that kind of experience? Because this really has been fairly recent.
Yeah, it's pretty much been since 2016, and then more. It was quite intense starting then, but more since 2018. So what was the experience like? It's been really stressful. It was really hard. I think because it was controversial, my dad's kind of growth to fame was surrounded in controversy. So it wasn't all fun and games of, you know, the media was after him, and then he was worried about his job at U of T. So it was quite hard on my family at the beginning because when you first have like an article written about you, then it's shocking. And then eventually you get used to it, but it takes like a number of years. It took a number of years to kind of get more used to it and be like, okay, if someone writes an article that's completely slanderous and full of lies, it doesn't really matter. But at the
Right.
beginning, it's like, how could they say these things? What are people going to think? What are my friends going to think? And I guess eventually we got desensitized, but it took, 2.5 years of every time there was some new controversy, it just being a complete catastrophe for my family. So it's been weird. It's been super weird. I'm very grateful for all the opportunity that's presented itself to me being his daughter. And I helped him navigate his work and simplify his life while he was on tour and grow social media and handle the online products, do translations, like a number of projects. So that's been fun. I wouldn't change it for sure, but it's been very stressful. It's just recently become less stressful. And then there were a bunch of health problems at the same time.
Right.
It's been a crazy 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. I don't know that anything anyone could have done or taught you could have prepared you for
No,
really.
no,
Look at that
definitely
face.
not.
As you're, oh God, no. It's like a
Yeah.
wall. Well, because I always wonder about those things because I'm very, very just I'm dipping a toe into the public sector right now for the first time in a way, and I've just started to see the drops in the bucket of the people who have the things to say that really mean nothing, but yet they still say them.
Yeah.
No one prepares you or educates you or there's no training for what you walk into with this. And I think a lot of people overlook what that does to a human being when you're in a spotlight or you're slowly getting there or you're so big that it's so overwhelming that living a normal life just isn't normal anymore for you.
Yeah.
And for you that had to have been difficult because with autoimmune disease and all of these other ailments that you did struggle with previously, does that not exacerbate the situation much more for you?
Well, I was on a number of medications for autoimmune disorder and for bipolar and like psych meds. And so my tolerance to stress was like terrible. When I got off of medication, when I first put everything into remission with diet, I stopped taking some of the medications too rapidly and I had really severe SSRI withdrawal. So that hit, my dad went through the same thing. That hit us at the same time as the controversy. And so I would say most of the stress we experienced was probably more likely due to the SSRI withdrawal rather than the controversy. But human beings are not meant to have that amount of attention. Like you can't adapt to that. You're supposed to have these tiny little relationships. And if someone reacts negatively to something you're saying, perhaps they're right. So then you adapt your behavior to match what society deems acceptable. But when you're exposed to that, because there are thousands and thousands of people coming at you, there's no way to adapt to that. I don't think anybody, I suppose if you grow up with it, like maybe if you have a super famous adult and then it's like that since you're really little, maybe you can kind of adapt, but I don't see that being a particularly comfortable way to live.
Well, I mean, if you look back at people like Billy Ray Cyrus, I
Yeah.
mean, you watch these kids grow up. You see what's the Home Alone kid? I can't remember his name. It's
Macaulay
like,
Culkin.
oh my God, Macaulay Culkin. But you see these kids that grow up in this, and it's if there's not enough education or protection around those children, they're being put into the fire for what it seems like on the outside, at least.
Yeah. I don't know what you could teach people though. Like I think that the human nervous system just isn't built to withstand that kind of pressure. And so I can remember just when I was younger, probably more as a teenager, looking at actors or somebody who was famous and being like, well, what do they have to complain about? In kind of like a jealous and resentful way. I was like, oh, whatever. They have money and they have all these things. Like, what do they have to complain about? But then when, and I just got like a taste of it, the amount of stress that comes with it is so insane that I can't imagine having to be like a 14-year-old and deal with that without being able to understand it. It sounds very unpleasant. I have a lot more compassion towards people who are having a hard time, who are in the spotlight. It's way harder to have a hard time when people are watching than to have a hard time when people aren't watching.
Isn't that the truth? My God, you guys have really gone through the gamut with it too. I mean, it's no secret that there's been, you guys have had health issues, and it's fascinating to me. Um, really, your what's the word I'm looking for here? Your come off of the medication, because here what we really discuss a lot about is mental health, but we talk to all different types of people about this, and there seems to be a common denominator that I am seeing over a pattern of time where medication is constantly being overprescribed, whether it's for bipolar, schizophrenic, ADHD medication in children. It seems like that is the first quick answer we give as a Western society. And I'm wondering what that experience has been like for you, kind of going through that, starting from your first med to where you're at now. If you could run me through that, I would love to know.
Sure. So, I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis when I was in grade 2, and I was put on yeah, and it was bad. It was in like 37 joints. It was almost everywhere except for my spine, and I was nearly wheelchair bound in grade 3. So it was really bad. And I was put on immune suppressants that I injected. So serious immune suppressants. And I had cortisone injections into my joints, and that almost reversed the arthritis fairly rapidly. But immune
Mhm.
suppressants are intense. So I was sick like all the time because you're a kid. So I'd get sick in September and then I would never get better. So I was on
Right.
antibiotics all the time for bronchitis. And then in grade 6, I was put on SSRIs for major depressive disorder. So my symptoms were like, I wasn't sleeping. I was having really severe nightmares. I had this phobia that somebody was going to come in and like hurt me. I remember I had like a bag packed under my bed for this like intrusion that could potentially happen. I knew how to take like the window out of my basement window. Like I was really living in a state of like fight or flight fear.
Yes.
And that was probably exacerbated by the immune suppressants and the like level of inflammation in my body. But
Hmm.
regardless, it manifested in really severe depression. And so I was put on SSRIs in grade 6. And
So
at the
young.
so young, but I can understand what happened. Like I went to see a psychiatrist at the hospital where I was being treated for arthritis. And a lot of kids who are chronically ill have mental problems as well, which
Hmm.
isn't surprising. Um,
No.
and so they're like, well, what do you do with somebody who's that freaked out all the time? You have to calm them down.
Right.
Um, and they didn't talk. Like at that time, they didn't know anything. I'm positive they don't talk about diet or anything now too. But at that time, they most certainly didn't. So it was like, well, take these, they'll help. And initially, they helped. I can remember feeling relaxed and being able to sleep better and things. So it made a pretty massive difference initially, but I got sicker. My mental health got worse. I started getting rashes. Um, I was chronically fatigued when I was 14, and then when I was 17, I had my hip and ankle replaced from the arthritis that wasn't controlled from the immune suppressants.
So did you have a
And
whole, sorry, not to interrupt, did you have a whole hip replacement?
yeah, hip and ankle. The hip replacement was the least of my problems, honestly. The ankle replacement was terrible. The hip replacement was pretty easy for a replacement.
God, I'm
Low
just sitting here.
bar.
I know I'm thinking to myself, sorry, I do this where you say some people say things and I just have to wrap my brain around it for a second because I know you're a mom and I know what my hips feel like now after giving birth, and they're my natural hips. So I'm concerned for your hips right now. Sorry. Just got really worried about your hips.
They're they do a really good job with hip replacements. Like it's
Okay,
a pretty
great.
simple joint. It's just like looks like this, right? And
Right.
what they do is they put something into your hip
Yep.
here, and then they replace this whole thing, and then they stick it down into your leg. So it's
Oh.
simple enough that they're actually
Mhm.
pretty good at hip replacements. So my hip now is like stiff if you're in like a cross leg position, but
Yep.
I don't have any pain, and it's been pretty much good to go since I had it replaced. Hip
Not bad.
replacements, yeah, for like people scared of replacements, they've got hip replacements like down pat.
They're dialed.
They're good. Ankle replacements, not so much because that's a much more complicated joint. So
Right.
that was like pretty bad for about 10 years, and then I had to have it replaced again, and now it's okay.
Oh my God. Okay,
It's been
keep going.
it's been quite a life. Anyway, I got sicker and sicker. I had those 2 joints replaced when I was 17, and then my mental health got a lot worse when I went away to university, and I was my antidepressants went up, I was put on another antidepressant, like, I was just switched around from some medications, that caused a whole bunch of terrible side effects,
Right.
and when I was 23, I had this rash and it stopped healing, and I was like, "Okay, I need to figure out what's wrong with me or I think it's gonna kill me." Because at that point, it was like I had arthritis everywhere. I was on 7 different medications. My mental health was a disaster. I was sleeping so much, I was on Adderall to keep myself awake, or I just
Oh,
slept all the time. So when I was 23, I just started reading, and I first started reading about this rash I was trying to fix, and I came to the conclusion that gluten could be triggering the rash.
right.
Then I went on an elimination diet, and that was kind of the beginning of me starting to feel better. So, anyway, about 3 months into this elimination diet, so that was like a lot of meat, fish,
Hmm.
greens, and then some root vegetables. So it was like
Okay.
really restrictive paleo. Um, 3 months into that, I felt way better. My arthritis was basically gone. My rash had cleared up. My chronic fatigue had left, and that was I had that from 14 to 23, and it had never stopped. So it
Oh, wow.
let up after 3 months, so I stopped taking Adderall. Um, and then a couple weeks after I stopped taking Adderall, my depression lifted for the first time in my entire life. So this
Oh,
like
wow.
yeah, this feeling of like walking through mud or tar, just being heavy and having this like gray cloud around my world and feeling like I was mourning, like that just
Hmm.
constant feeling lifted, which it was the first time in my entire life that I hadn't had that. I didn't even know that you could live without that. I didn't know what life felt like without that. And I was at that point, I was like, okay, I'd stopped taking my immune suppressants because my arthritic symptoms had gone down. I'd stopped taking the Adderall. I'd stopped taking the antibiotics for my skin. I'd stopped everything except for the antidepressant. And at that
Hmm.
point, I was like, was diet behind all of my health issues? I'm
There
not
was like a
taking any.
moment.
Oh, it was crazy. Like I was in shock for like 2.5 years almost after that because I'd grown up thinking the only help I was getting was from the medical system and there was nothing I could do about it. And I was really lucky to have the medical system where I wouldn't be able to walk. And
Right.
so it was a huge switch. It was like, whoa, this might have been controllable.
Yeah.
And then I stopped taking my antidepressant, and it turns out people become dependent, like physically dependent on antidepressants. And I'd been taking them since grade 6 at a really
Yep.
high dose. And I was like, the depression's gone. I could feel it was gone. So I stopped taking the antidepressant over a period of like 2.5 weeks. And I cut it down in half, didn't notice anything, cut it down in half again, didn't notice anything, stopped taking it, didn't notice anything. And 2 weeks later, I started experiencing SSRI withdrawal. And then for the next, and SSRI withdrawal was so much worse than the depression I had been experiencing that I
Yeah.
cannot
She's a
describe it.
bitch.
It was, I had
Hmm.
I had periodic visual hallucinations for about a year of just
Hmm.
horrible thing that I had this feeling that I was falling sometimes. I had nerve pain, I had light sensitivity and sound sensitivity and temperature sensitivity. It would like I couldn't sleep periodically, which was the opposite of the chronic fatigue. It was catastrophic and I had no idea what was going on. So at the time I was like I seemed to be reacting to foods. I got really sensitive to carbs. And so
Oh, okay.
I was like, well, I'm really severely sensitive to carbs. But now I know that that was exacerbated from the SSRI withdrawal.
The SSRIs that you were on, sorry, I want to touch on those if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Because the community at large, the veteran and first responder community, that's like the number one thing they give us, like right off
yeah,
the bat. They just shove it down your throat before
yeah,
you even tell them what the problem is. And that's a big thing I'm very against. And I was on an SSRI for 11 years and I was very dependent on it as well. And I went off of it this January was the last time I was on the last pharmaceutical med. I was on 10 as well. So I
whoa,
weaned my way down. When you said something that caught my attention, I just took a little note of it. You said, I noticed the depression had lifted, but I was still on the SSRI. What did that feel like to you when the depression had lifted? Because I know there's going to be listeners who is like, I've been on this SSRI for 10 years,
Yeah.
20 years. What does that actually feel like to know what it lifts so that you can know that you might not need that?
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good question because it was really tricky for me to differentiate between like, at, when you stop taking SSRIs and then you to potentially get SSRI withdrawal, the doctors will say, "Oh, it's your underlying condition and it's back." So there's
Right.
a difference between like depression and SSRI withdrawal. And depression for me felt like I just described it, like physically moving was hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was covered in tar or something. So my limbs were really heavy. I was panicky and really jumpy, and I had this constant feeling of mourning, like someone close to me had died, but it was like a physical feeling.
Just heavy.
Yeah, in my like solar plexus kind of area.
It's
Right
called the
there.
feely spot. It's your intuition spot. It's the
Yeah.
feely spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
feely.
So and it was really, really obviously horrible. When it
Yeah.
lifted, everything got lighter. So I could walk better.
Okay.
My color perception changed. So I could see colors more vividly. The sound of music was brighter. So it was
Oh,
like,
wow.
oh yeah, it was massively different. And that happened while I was on SSRIs. And it happened when the rest of my autoimmune symptoms lessened or went away when I
Mm-hmm.
dramatically changed my diet. I never
Okay.
got out of the depression before I changed my diet.
That's what I was going to say to you, because I know when you, like you say, you have these discussions with these doctors at a very early and young age, and there's no discussion of sugar intake, carb intake, processed food intake,
Yeah.
how that's just affecting kids in general before you even medicate them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do that while you were on all of these drugs, like especially when you got into your late teens and you had going through major surgeries and those take long recovery points. When that depression was there, did you ever, because you had always lived in that depressive state, it felt like from very young on, did you
Yeah.
ever have the suicidal ideations, or was that just
Yeah.
normal?
So I had suicidal ideation, I would say, before I started taking antidepressants when I was little. And it wasn't,
Okay.
it wasn't as strong as ideation. It was just like, would people care if I was still here? So it was like the very
Oh,
beginning of that,
the ramp up.
the ramp up. Yeah. And then I had, when I got switched from an SSRI to an SNRI, and when that happened, I felt like hurting myself. It was like an impulse. But I
Oh,
got off of that very quickly. SNRIs were not good for me.
hard nose for you, huh?
Hard nose, yeah. So no, I would say the depression I had didn't really have suicidal ideation. It was like panic and fear, but mostly this really heavy sense of mourning and doom.
Oh, that's, I mean, that's
Impending
just
doom.
impending doom. I mean, that's terrifying all on its own, without even having to think about anything else as a kid, just feeling that impending doom
Yeah.
constantly happen. That's not ideal.
No.
It's, I mean, it's not the route we want to go when we're raising kids, but we do what we can.
Yep.
So you went through all of that, having all of those replacements, and moving forward, once you got to university, where did you end up going to university? Were you close to home? Did you
No,
university?
my parents wanted me to stay close to home because they're like, "Oh, your doctors are here."
Yeah.
Fair. And I was like, "No." So I went to Montreal. They're in Toronto. I was like, "No, see ya."
You went to McGill?
Concordia. I went to
Oh,
the art
Concordia.
school.
Ooh, girl, you're fancy.
I just
Damn.
didn't get in. No, it's not even that. I wanted to get into McGill, but because I had my hip replacement in May and my ankle replacement in November, I missed
Mhm.
almost 2 years of high school because it was a full year high school. So I
Oh,
missed like
wow.
the end of one year and the beginning of the next year.
So you were
So
hooped.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I was not intelligent enough to get into Ottawa U, so I went to Algonquin. So it's fine. It's like we all have our backup plans, okay? They all work out the way they're supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
well, that's fantastic. I love that. And so once you went to university though, and you started to come off of these medications, you you would have had to have felt some type of stressor Would you have not? I mean, you're going into a full university program, you've moved away, you're no longer around your doctors and your subset of support.
Oh, so I actually moved home. So I went to
Okay.
university and I got really sick. Like I changed my
Okay.
diet. I was surviving off of like pizza and pasta and beer and
Great.
like Mr. Noodles or Ichiban. Good times. But
Okay.
yeah, I got way worse. So after a year and a half of university, I dropped out and went home.
Okay.
And it was about, and anyway, so then I went back to university and I went into science because I thought I need to figure out what's wrong with me. Maybe I need to get a PhD in microbiology or immunology or just try to figure out what's wrong with me. And then it
Mm-hmm.
was 8 months after that when I found diet and then started weaning off of medication. So I was back in Toronto at that point.
Okay. So and then you had switched so you didn't go right to the Lions diet.
No.
You kind of figured your way up to see just to move meds away. And once you were able to get off of that last medication and you were back in Toronto, when did you really go hard on the meat? Ah, that is a sentence. I heard it, or I'm a child. Mikhaila, when did you start going hard on the meat?
It wasn't until, so I was on paleo and my
Okay.
symptoms went away, my depression went away, my arthritis went away, my rash went away, my chronic fatigue went away. It was very restricted paleo. I was only eating about 15 foods. Like I said, it was like meat and fish and salad and sweet potatoes and carrots, and that was about basically it. But that worked. It wasn't until I stopped taking the SSRI and then I went like completely nuts. So every time I tried to have more carbs, I'd have all this like pain, insomnia, visual disturbances. That's what the medical community calls them. But I was full on hallucinating. And I didn't know that that was SSRI withdrawal until like I found out more about it this year. So it was just this mystery of like, why am I so sensitive to carbs and sound and light and heat? So that year, also about 8 months after I stopped taking SSRIs, 10 months, no, a year, almost
Okay.
exactly a year after I stopped taking SSRIs, I was still experiencing SSRI withdrawal. I got pregnant. And then my paleo diet stopped working. So during the pregnancy, my arthritis came back, not as
Oh
bad as it had
no.
previously, but like badly enough that I didn't want to live like that. So my arthritis was back. I was itchy. My chronic fatigue never came back. But
Well, that's good.
yeah, I was depressed and I was like, why is this diet not working for me? I'm being really strict. Like, what's
Mm-hmm.
going on? And so that was throughout the pregnancy. I was pretty miserable throughout the pregnancy. And I was like, maybe that's just what pregnancy is like for me.
Right. Yeah, that could just be your
Reasonable.
body.
Yeah. And so 4 months into breastfeeding and my symptoms weren't better. And at that point, my arthritis was bad enough that if I was like waking up at night to breastfeed and pushing myself off the bed, my wrist was buckling. And I was like, I don't want to drop my baby. Like it got to that point.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I was only eating meat and greens because I'd noticed that my response to like sweet potatoes and carrots made me feel worse a little bit, not noticeably, but worse enough that I was like, what's bugging me? What's bugging me? It has to be food because it was food before. Why
Right.
would it not be food now? And in December 2017, I got to the point where I was like, steak isn't giving me an autoimmune response. I can just tell. So I'll just cut every other variable out. So I went
Right.
to steak and I basically just got rid of salad because I was really just eating steak and salad at that point.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I went all meat. And it was like a week and I felt slightly better, but there's a transition period when you drop and you stop eating carbs, like your microbiome shifts, your
Mm-hmm.
body, your body changes because you've been eating carbs forever. To no carbs is quite different metabolically.
Mm-hmm.
So my digestion was like a mess. And I was like, this can't possibly be healthy. It was like
Right.
getting bloated, just like this can't be healthy. So I tried to bring salad back and then I woke up the next morning, my arthritis was worse and I was itchy all over my body. And I was like, okay, fine.
It's
I'll
the
just give this
salad.
a shot. Yeah. It's like, whatever. I have no idea what's going on. So it was about a month and my mood improved enough that I stopped crying. I was like crying in the morning. I stopped crying in the
Mm.
morning. My arthritis went away. And then it took about 5 months and the anxiety went away. And so 5 months later, I was like completely better.
So your anxiety lifted.
Yeah, so it was depression that lifted first. It took about 6 weeks. It was
Yeah.
arthritis that lifted first. Then it was depression at about 6 weeks. And then 5 months later, the anxiety went away.
That's wild to me because anxiety is wow. You give a lot of people a lot of things to think about when you say stuff like that. Because
Yeah,
anxiety is crippling to
it's
our
crippling.
population
Yeah.
on a global scale.
It was crippling to me. It was crippling to me. Like I was going to continue living like that, but that was like my state of being, was like, I'll keep living,
Right.
but I'm not that happy about it. I'll
Yeah,
just
that's
wait
not
and
great.
maybe it'll get better. Yeah. It was completely unbearable. Like I'd have in the morning, I'd wake up and it'd just be like all the problems in my life. How am I going to solve them? Like clouds of overwhelming thoughts and no clear path out of it. And it was just like intolerable. The depression was worse because the depression was the anxiety plus this feeling of impending doom. But the anxiety was bad enough. And I've spoken to a lot of people because I've publicized the diet and was like,
Right.
at least you can use it as an elimination diet to figure out what's bugging you. If it's
Right.
food, people have to try it for at least 6 weeks. And if they're on psych meds, probably more like 5 months.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, but I've talked to a lot of people who've gotten off of psych meds by using the diet, and it seems to follow the same kind of trajectory of like 6 weeks to see improvement. And then if you're on a bunch of medication, it takes a little bit longer. Like if you haven't taken any psych meds, then you're probably actually in a luckier spot, because then
Right.
you might be feeling better in a month and a half instead of longer, because you have to deal with the meds. But it completely changed my life. So part of the reason, like my main job is I'm doing the podcast, I'm talking to people on there, and I've kind of gone away from diet a bit because I don't have any health problems anymore.
Yeah, and you did the TEDx talk about it.
I did.
Well.
Yeah.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I really hope they actually put it online.
Of course. What are you talking about?
We'll see.
You're being awfully silly.
Okay.
I think you're being awfully silly. I think it's going to be just fine.
Okay, good. I really hope so. Like it'd be nice to get some case studies on the diet.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, well, not yet. So it took a while for like the ketogenic diet. They've been using it to treat epilepsy like since 1920. But then when the pharmaceutical companies kind of took over and they had anti-epileptics, the ketogenic diet kind of fell off because it's a lot easier to take a pill than be on a restrictive diet. But
and
there
make
were
money.
Yeah, that too. So there are now studies again on a ketogenic diet, but technically the diet I'm on is a ketogenic diet that's plant-free. So I'm in, because it's so high fat and everything. If you just eat meat, you're in ketosis all the time.
Right.
So it has the same benefits of a ketogenic diet. And then if you have immune system problems or your body's being reactive to things, and that could potentially be triggered by plant proteins. If your body's hyperactive, you shouldn't be reacting to plants. Like a healthy person shouldn't be eating a salad and then having an autoimmune flare up. That shouldn't be happening. But there are so many people who are like sick and damaged from medication and antibiotics and like stress and whatever else, that people get a little hyperactive. Their immune system gets hyperactive and then they can start reacting to things. And one way to rule that out is to just get rid of all the variables.
That's exactly it. We're going through something like that with my husband right now. He's really unwell, and happened out of the blue. About 4 weeks ago, we thought he dropped and had a heart attack, but it wasn't, and we don't know what it is. And they don't. He's 33. He's a healthy, very fit. So now we're going through a food thing. We're doing this.
Yeah.
We're on the path right now, wholeheartedly, and it is exhausting and horrific and painful to watch. And when you know you can't fix someone, it's even worse. So I was like, I need to talk to Mikhaila, because I know that she has used this as a way to make her life livable, but not only livable, thrive.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, because there are people that are going through things like this that have had babies. And for you, because you're a mother, how did you find that affected you or your body when you were in the middle of all of this?
Yeah, so I was pretty paranoid about that because I was 4 months into breastfeeding and she was just breastfeeding. And I was
Right.
like, there wasn't, now you can go into groups and there are like tens of thousands of people only eating meat. So it's a little less stressful. But at the time,
Yeah.
I was like, this is crazy. It's still stressful now for people, but it was really stressful. But Scarlett had a couple of things happen. So Scarlett had cradle cap, and her cradle cap
Mhm.
went away when I switched
My
over.
son still has that.
Yeah, I seriously think that's because my body was irritated and it was irritating her body when she was breastfeeding.
Smart woman making
I
notes.
think because her cradle cap went away and I was like, well, so that was really nice.
Mhm.
My milk supply increased, it didn't decrease. And I think
Okay.
that's just because like I was really quite ill. Like I had arthritis, I was itchy, I was depressed enough that I was crying every morning. Like I wasn't as sick as I'd been and I wasn't on any medication, but I was
Postpartum?
I thought, right? That's what I assumed.
Mhm.
But then it went away with diet. So
Mm,
plus it was before I actually gave birth. It was as soon as I got pregnant that the depression worsened.
got
I
it.
thought maybe it was stress and things, but then I had this full body itch and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that's not like that's an immune response. The arthritis is an immune response. When it's in your head, it's really difficult to figure out if it's situational or not. But from
Right.
my experience, if you have like cycling thoughts and you're anxious, it's probably not situational. It's probably something your body's irritated by. But things just improved. Scarlett was happier. Her cradle cap went away. My milk supply improved. And then that was about it.
Wow. And then that just after you had her, did you see anything with her? Have you seen anything? Because I mean, I only know from social media, but she eats meat predominantly as well.
Predominantly, yeah. So
Hmm.
I've been super paranoid, as you can imagine, because I got
Of
sick when I
course.
was 2. My first arthritic symptoms showed up when I was 2, and I was diagnosed when I was 7. And I was so sick. My mom has an autoimmune disorder. She has lupus. My
Okay.
dad has an autoimmune disorder, depending on what doctor you ask. He was diagnosed as fibromyalgia. It's like nerve pain and things. And he's got like this major depressive disorder. They're
Hmm.
both on the diet to keep their symptoms in remission.
And
So
they keep
this
them
is,
there.
yeah. So this is like, I'm like, how much of this is genetic? I don't know. I know that
Right.
celiac disease can be genetic because it's a
Mhm.
gene. So I've been super paranoid about her. But what I've decided is, even according to the guidelines now, which you shouldn't take seriously, but even according to them, a kid's first food should be meat, high in iron. Like they've switched over from iron fortified cereal to actually meat because it's
Just
just
like,
nat
because why?
yeah, because yeah. So
Uh-huh.
um we do primarily meat, but she also eats most fruit and vegetables. But I let her decide what she wants to eat, except I
Right.
put a limit on fruit or she would just survive off of fruit.
Fruitarian. Your family would like
She
collapse.
would, yeah, she would just for sure just eat fruit. But other than that, she kind of decides for herself. And then the rule is if she gets a rash or if she's bloated or I see
Hmm.
something that's a bit off, then we restrict again till the symptoms are gone and then expand again.
And she
But
doesn't care, I'm assuming.
no, I mean she's never had sugar. I'm one of those
That's my
parents.
girl. I'm same with me.
Okay, okay, good. She has honey. I give her honey.
Jack
Honey's
has
fine.
had, yeah, honey is fine. Jack doesn't like honey. He did, he never had sugar. He's never had juice. He's had water or breast
Yeah.
milk. Like
Yeah,
he's,
same with Scarlett, just water,
yeah,
breast
just
milk.
water. Somebody tried to give him juice once and he just went like, no, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Candy at Halloween, he just gives it all to us. He
yeah.
just wants the toys. I'm like, fuck yes. We've done
Yeah,
this wrong.
right? And that saves you so much suffering because if you grow up eating sugar all the time, cutting out sugar is so awful. Like
Like
I've gotten
crack.
off of so many medications and getting off of sugar was really, really hard. And so if
Hmm.
you just, I figure because she's going to go off to school and everything. So say when she's 7 that someone's going to give her a fruit roll up or something. I figure if you can get a kid to that stage, ideally they'll be able to taste it and be like, something's wrong, because their palate is normal instead of.
Jack does that. Yeah, he
Yeah.
hates it.
How old is he?
He's 5. He just turned 5 the end of July. So
Yeah.
ours are only a year apart.
Yeah.
And he started kindergarten this week. And I pack his lunch, and it is hilariously healthy. And I think the worst in there is a couple goldfish crackers, but that's like because they look like fish. And so he doesn't even eat them. I just put him in for color. I just try to think I don't want the school to think I'm crazy completely. And he'll dummy it, and they has no issue, but kids will offer him plenty of snacks or candy. And I remember the day he put a chocolate bar in his mouth and he went to take a bite. His face, he just went, ah, ah, like he hated it so much. And I was the most proud moment of my life. But all the other parents are like, what's the big deal? He doesn't like it. And I'm like, it's because he should never like it.
Yeah. I feel ya. We're on the same page. Yeah.
On the same page. I know I only have 5 more minutes here, and I have 900 things to ask you. So just bear with me here. As you kind of moved forward into what you've got going on now and how you're functioning and how you're keeping everything at bay with your stress levels as they've increased, and your family stress, and just that whole, blowing up of who you are to the world, because I think you deserve it. What is it that you find the most difficult, and how do you cope with all of that the best?
So the most difficult by far were my family's health troubles. Like,
Right.
Work can get stressful, life can get stressful, but nothing is as stressful as witnessing somebody you love sick. Nothing else matters. Right. So the stress I deal with at work, which can be overwhelming. Like last week I was doing 15-hour days, which was ridiculous. Like I can't do that. But because my family's feeling better, it's like, oh, I'm exhausted physically, but who cares about this kind of exhaustion? So, but that being said, mostly how I've been dealing with stress, and this is something that's been actually new for me, but I've been reading the Bible in the morning.
Really?
Yeah. And I didn't grow up religious at all, but that's made a massive.
That's why you're reading it now.
Yeah, probably.
Because if you grow up like I grew up, where you go to a Catholic school your whole life.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
You go to high school and then it's shoved down your throat that religion is everything. You distance yourself from it later in life.
Yeah. Well, I've done the opposite, and but like I really didn't I grew up with my dad teaching like the metaphors in the Bible, but nothing more than that. And it didn't really resonate until my parents got sick, and then something clicked, and I was like, oh, so that's been what I've been doing recently. And it's been really helpful. And I think part of it is I have something to do. Like I'll wake up super early, make my bed, get dressed, and then read for a while. And that means I don't just dive into, if I think about it logically, I don't just dive into work and social media right away. I spend like 15 minutes just reading where I'm not thinking about anything other than that. And I think that just sets up my mind to like be calm at the beginning of the day. So that's one aspect, but I don't know. It's helping me though.
Almost like a silent meditation to yourself, really. That's what it seems like. That's beautiful, though. It's nice to see that you found something that works for you, that starts your day off properly, because you go into that. And is your daughter in kindergarten or preschool yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those mornings, what it's like.
Yeah. That's why I wake up early. Yeah. If I don't wake up early and I just get right into that, then I'm just stressed out for the rest of the day.
What's early for you?
6:40.
Oh, so she gets up at a normal human time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I hate you a little bit now.
I can see that. When does yours wake up?
4:35 every day.
No.
Ready to just rip.
When does he go to sleep?
7:38.
That makes no sense.
Clockwork. Yeah, he's a psychopath. I use that term very loosely with him, because there is no reasoning that any human would want to get up. That I can't even get up early and have a meditation. That's all my point is.
That's brutal.
Yeah, listen, there are ways that kids, they function completely different than us. Some kids sleep, some just want to be sociopaths. Whatever works for you. I'm glad you have found things though that have worked for you in your healing and in your progression. But I know you have to go now, but I do want to tell you, this has not been enough, not even close. I have 900 more questions for you, and we would love to have you back on literally any time that you want to make time to come back on.
Okay, that sounds like fun. Where
Yeah.
are you located?
I'm in Vancouver.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
I'm in the Canadias. I know you're moving.
I'm moving, yeah.
When are you moving?
October 15th.
Oh my God. I am literally going to be in America around that time again.
Where are you going?
All over the place.
Nice.
I'm in all over the place. I'm leaving after this conversation to go hop on a plane to Texas. So,
wow. Well, have
Yeah.
fun. It was nice
I
meeting
will.
you. That was fun.
It was great meeting you. I know it was so short. Sorry, I normally do honestly through up to 3 hours because I have so many questions. I'm so curious about the people I talk with. And I have 900 things I want to talk to you about. I just find you fascinating.
I will come back on. This was fun.